All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. I am Andrew, aka Mage Mindgasms, for the purposes of this video, of course. And I'm going to do my spoiler free review of Memories of Ice, Book 3, in Steven Erikson's epic, arguably grimdark fantasy series. This one goes basically full on military fantasy, and it's a really cool series. It's got an awesome magic system, all these different types of magic users, like mages and assassins that use magic, and wizards and witches, and beings that shapeshift into dragons, and all kinds of cool stuff. So this is going to be a basically spoiler-free review, and check out my previous spoiler-free reviews on book 1 and 2. Book 1, Gardens of the Moon, and book 2, Deadhouse Gates. So, yeah, let's get right into the plot of this one. So, yeah, this is interesting. This is definitely the most epic. I think it's also the longest in the series so far. I'm pretty sure, at least the edition I have, I don't know whether that's the trade paperback or the mass market edition, but anyway, that edition that I have is a, about 1,200 pages. So yeah, this is super long, a super long epic fantasy book. This is serious business, only for hardcore fantasy nerds, I would say. And of course, like I always say, the thing about Malazan is that it's it's kind of, at least at first, almost better to just absorb what's happening and almost view it as an anthology series, and avoid trying to really fully understand every aspect of what's really going on. But yeah, so anyway, this book, Memories of Ice, takes place at the same time during the events of book 2, Deadhouse Gates. And basically, there are some of the characters who were in book 1. And so like I say in the title here, there's all sorts of cool stuff in there. Like, there are cannibal armies and ghosts and mages at war with these giant, like, dinosaur birds, and it's all based on it. There's this massive, awesome, slow, epic build up to this massive war between basically uh this this guy's cannibal this cannibal warlord who's controlling a massive cannibal warlord army, who, it turns out, is he is being I don't remember whether he's being just controlled, or I think he might also have been possessed by the Crippled God, who is this evil renegade god. So basically, uh, this Whiskey Jack goes rogue, who is part of the Bridge Burners, this giant Malazan army, and his army goes rogue and goes off against, I think his name is Panion Domon, yeah, who is basically this cannibal warlord who has this massive army, and, like I said, is working for the Crippled God, who is a renegade evil god. And the Crippled God is trying to poison the Warrens, which will basically kill all magic users. And so there's also some sort of cosmic aspect where it will kill everyone, not just magic users. So that's really interesting too. And obviously, the magic system has something to do with the plot too. Definitely not, the plot doesn't center around the magic system to anywhere near the degree of someone like Brandon Sanderson's books, for example, especially Mistborn and Stormlight Archive is in particular. But the like I said in my other spoiler-free reviews, the magic system is still really interesting. Apparently, Steven Erikson doesn't really like hard magic systems, which is interesting because his is like somewhere in between hard and soft magic system. You can There are some sort of clear rules for how magic users like mages and wizards and assassins and so many other types of beings in this world use magic, but not every detail is totally clear. But that's one aspect of this that's really interesting. So, just like in book two, just like how in book two we get more world building than in book one, in this one, book three, we also get a little more world building than we get in book two. And so we learn about the different types of I think Teast, like Teast Andy, and so Anomander Rake, who is in Whiskey Jack's army, who's the second in command in that rogue Malazan army. Uh, he is the one who's I think he's I don't remember whether he's a Talan Imas. Yeah, I think he's a Talan Imas, and we also learn about the different types of Teast. There's Teast Andy and other types of Teasts, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we learn about the different type of Warrens and that they're elder Warrens. So we only like at first it's just about this epic battle, but then it gradually gets this cosmic epic scale of how the bad guy, at least according to the army, like Whiskey Jack and that sort of thing. I think it's arguably grimdark, and some people disagree, which I find interesting because it's kind of open to interpretation. uh, if you're watching this guy from the so-called green team from the Legendarium, which I don't know whether they're officially or unofficially associated with the Legendarium podcast, but either way, that's pretty cool. Anyway, he said I was talking about how Deadhouse Gates and Malazan in particular is a grimdark series, and he was disagreeing. And I've seen other people agree with me, and I initially didn't think it was in book one, but I kind of was more convinced that it was in book two and in book three also. But people can disagree about that because it really depends on how you define what grimdark is. And grimdark, like Game of Thrones slash A Song of Ice and Fire, for example, or Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. And yeah, I would say it is grimdark, especially because most of the characters are pretty morally gray. Like like I said, to the characters like Whiskey Jack and Anomander Rake, and also Quick Ben, of course, who is one of the main characters, and he's a mage in the Malzahn army that is controlled by Whiskey Jack, and Anomander Rake is in. So all that stuff with that happens with him with Quick Ben is really cool too, of course, because he has some awesome magic battles with other magic users and these fascinating monster creatures like these massive dinosaur birds, like I said. And like I said, as you can see in the thumbnail here, there's basically a confrontation with another rogue god, not just a crippled god, but another rogue god. The and different levels of gods in the hierarchy of gods who are on different sides of these, which is what's so one of the many aspects of this series that's so interesting. And as you can see there too, is they're epic battles against these monster creatures that have like blades for arms. And then I don't remember, I think that might be a human, but on the cover of the book that I have, in comparison to this other image here, the guy with flames behind him, there's a picture of what I think is a jagout, which are kind of these, I don't know, they're kind of somewhat orc looking creatures. But yeah, there's so many interesting aspects of what's going on in this book, so much more than just the main war that it's building up to. So for example, yeah, there's also I guess I won't say the name of the character, but there's character that kind of disappeared in book one that comes back, and it turns out that they were basically hiding away in a warren. And so there's some more stuff that happens with that I don't need to get into because I can just gloss over it for the spoiler-free review. But he like has a really interesting plot going on too. And basically, another character is resurrected who died in book one. Their soul is resurrected in someone else's body, or they're at least being the soul is moved into that person's body, and that person's soul is basically possessing this person's body. So anyway, there's an interesting aspect too, where, oh yeah, I forgot. So not only is this character's soul inhabiting this person's body, who is basically in this form sort of resurrected, at least in their soul, if not their body, from book one, but they also have brought along with them the soul of basically their love interest with them, to in order to inhabit / possess another body so they can be together but in different bodies. There's so much possession and soul switching and fascinating stuff going on in this series. Anyway, there's also an aspect where a seer who they're relying on. I don't remember who's relying on them. I don't remember whether it's the Malazan army. I think it might be the Malazan army, but it could be other characters in the book. But anyway, so this seer has gone insane, but she's gone insane because the Warrens have been poisoned by the Crippled God. Because, like I said, the Crippled God is like a renegade evil god that is kind of nihilistic, trying to destroy all the Warrens, and in order to destroy all the other gods and the magic users, and corrupt something like maybe the cosmic balance of the universe. I'm just guessing here, which is why it's going to have even more disastrous consequences than that. Um, so it's really fascinating, just like from the low level, the still really interesting stuff that's happening with all of these many different characters, all the way to the cosmic level. It's so interesting, all the different characters and the awesome magic battles and everything that's going on here, and the different layers of everything that's happened in the really intricate and complex world. Like I've said in my other reviews, and everyone seems to agree about this, that the Malazan Book of the Fallen series is, if not the most, that it has, if not the largest world of any fantasy world ever. It has at least something close to that. And yeah, it's a really awesome book, particularly because the plot doesn't drag at all, even though it's so fucking long. It's 1,200 pages or so, like I said, right? And uh, there are so many battles spaced throughout. It is a little bit slower at first, I think, than the first two books, which is part of why it's longer, I think. But it's still, I think, in my opinion, it's still just as good of a book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, just like I did with the first two books. Um, and that's because they're similar and they have some similar characters, but they're about different events happening in different parts of the world. So they're different enough in certain ways that I love certain aspects of all of them, and there are pros and cons to each of the 3 different books so far. And I don't mind that more of a build up, because the build up, especially in a war book, which is what this is, um, I think it's so effective. You can fuck that up, but it's done so effectively in this book. The build up to this epic war. Excuse me. So, yeah, another thing that happens at the very end of the book, and I won't reveal what ultimately happens in the battle and stuff, but there are all these fucking awesome battles. And basically, I think this is in the epilogue, Dweeker, who is the historian from book two, he basically tells them the main events, at least the main events of what happened with his character and the other characters who were with him from his perspective during what was called the Chain of Dogs, which is basically kind of what resulted in the series of battles that take place in book two, Deadhouse Gates. So yeah, he basically recounts to them a lot of the events from book two. And I'm sure I'm glossing over and missing so much of what happens in this book, but that's why Malazan is easy to do spoiler-free reviews with, honestly, because it's so complex and such a large world, and there's so many characters that. But I actually have a way easier time understanding this than something like Wheel of Time, even though it's probably even more complex and has an even larger and more complex world than Wheel of Time. But it's because the plot is so much more well paced, in my opinion. There are so many more battles, and I like all the stabby battles and stuff. It can get cheesy, and if it makes the plot and characters simplistic, then I think that can ruin it. But I like everything works well in this. The character is good, the plot is good, the world is good, the action is good. Everything really works well in this series. So if you haven't read any of the books in the Malazan series yet, definitely check out the first one, Gardens of the Moon. Check out my spoiler-free review video on that one, and book two, Deadhouse Gates, like I said. And yeah, let me know what you thought of my review in this comments. I know I only focused on, a handful of things and a handful of characters that happen and who are in the book, but so much stuff happens, and I probably misremembered a few of the specific details, I'm sure, and maybe pronounced some of the names wrong and shit like that. But yeah, anyway, this is a really awesome series with a fascinating world and magic system, and like I said, the Warrens that involved with the magic system. I mentioned this in the previous video, and I think the first one too. The They basically are physical places, and it's interesting. I forgot to mention that there's one Warren in this book, Memories of Ice, which was made from this. I think it was a person, but some sort of evil ruler's mass genocide of tens of thousands of people was used to create this Warren, which is so like fascinating and disturbing. And oh yeah, I forgot. This is another little detail of what happens with the seer in this book, Memories of Ice. So the people who realize that she's insane because she's been poisoned by Warrens, they try to set up this Warren as a fertility Warren, which I don't know why it's called that, but it doesn't like increase her fertility or anything. It's just basically a healing Warren. So they're trying to basically heal the insanity out of her by healing the poisoned Warren, I think. And it turns out that this Warren is actually manipulated and used for malicious purposes instead. So yeah, that's another really fascinating and complex and dark aspect of what happens in this book. And like in terms of whether it's grimdark or not, there's basically rape in every book, and there's all this brutal violence and stuff, and there's basically a moral grayness to the characters in the world, which is why I see it as grimdark. It's just perhaps not. It's not like fucking brutal in your face. Everyone is evil. Everything sucks. Like the way it gets in Game of Thrones, particularly the show, even more so than the books, I think sometimes. Um, and more than First Law, I think. Or I mean, no, I should say less than both that and First Law. Malazan is less grimdark than either of those, but I would still classify it as grimdark. But you know, some people would say that it's grim but not dark, and that's fascinating conversation to have too, because ultimately there's not an objectively correct opinion about it. Anyway, I think I've basically kind of gotten into enough here about what happens in this book, Memories of Ice. So yeah, like I said, check out my other videos on Malazan. I'm going to keep doing these spoiler-free review videos of future books as well, which will be really fun because I'm definitely going to eventually reread this series too, and probably do longer podcasts with my fantasy nerd friends Tristram and Dusty, who I talk with all the time on either my channel or his channel. So yeah, look for all of that in the future. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Share this everywhere. Get your friends to read Malazan and watch these videos and comment on this, and make their own videos about it too. And subscribe to the channel, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. This weekend, Saturday or Sunday, I'm going to talk with my friend Dusty about Golden Sun, which is book 2 in the kind of sci-fi fantasy that turns into more full-on sci-fi series called Golden Sun, which is book 2 in the Red Rising series, about a character who starts a rebellion on Mars, basically, to make it as concise as possible. Anyway, check that out this weekend, and check out my Patreon page too. Link is in the description for that, as always. And like I always say, always remember this. The funk cures. Oh, sorry, I just saw something that made me laugh. The funk cures all, and groove is in the heart, and Malazan is awesome. Definitely check it out. It's an awesome fantasy series. Oh, and yes, of course, always remember to be the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And yeah, Malazan is awesome. You should read it and read other awesome fantasy books until next. All the time too. I got ahead of myself there. All right, adios until next time, everyone. Let me know what you think in the comments, fantasy nerds.